Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm talking all things Muscat Ironman 70.3 that I raced on the weekend. So going to give a little insight onto all the things that I learned from my third middle distance triathlon. So it was a really great experience out there. So out there in Muscat, the capital of Oman, it was absolutely scenic. So fantastic course, out and back, 1 lap swim, lovely looped bike course, with absolute views for days, a little bit of climbing, and then a 3 lap run with a bit of an extension for a 70.3, which is overall not too bad. So this is my third middle distance triathlon. So what were the expectations versus reality, and how did I come away from the event, and would I do it again? So to start from the start, the swim. So the swim was obviously 1900 meters as per all Ironman 70.3 distance events. The swim was really scenic. So normally this one has a sort of it's typically known for being very shallow from the start. However, this time, not sure where there was a difference in the tides, but we were basically able to swim from around maybe 100 meters in. So, my pace was affected on the swim for the start, and it was probably a bit faster than I normally would swim, just because I was purely running through the water. However, once I got into the stroke of things, it was pretty good. Overall, probably one of my best swims in a triathlon. Still battling to break that 2 minute per 100, which probably lots of people, if they're listening to this, if you've done triathlons before, you'll know that's sort of one of the barriers. I sort of feel like that's it's almost like your 2.5-hour marathon to break it. It's like it's not so unachievable. And, I've done exactly 2 minutes per 100 on a 1500, but for the 1900, just wasn't quite able to get under there in the last sort of 300 meters, fatigued a little bit, and the pace slipped up. However, it was an absolutely fantastic swim. So there was sort of gates and pens for the start. However, it was a bit free-for-all, to be honest, and I ended up being up sort of around the 35-minute mark or 30-minute mark for the swim time. And I came away with around a 39 minutes thereabouts. So, I wasn't too far away from what I set. And I would say that overall, I didn't really get passed by too many people. So it was pretty chill. And if you've ever done one of the big events like an Ironman, it's not really a mass start. So, everyone sort of gets seated in a line, and then you're sort of get put towards the front, and then you get set off in groups of around 6. To be honest, it was pretty chilled, and I had no sort of no issues. I was hoping that there'd be a few people around me that I'd be able to sit on their feet, but to be honest, I felt like I was maybe passing a few more people than people were passing me, and there wasn't really anybody who was like around my pace. Now, obviously, you can sort of draft on the feet of people. That is part of the game. However, didn't really do that because I wasn't really able to get on anyone's feet, which, if I was to change one thing about the swim, it would probably be a bit more tactical and try and get on somebody's feet a bit earlier and try and find somebody that's going to swim thereabouts. I've been doing swim lessons for the last 2-3 months, and it really paid off. I would say that obviously I'm never going to probably be the best swimmer in the pack. However, one of the main differences being this time was I got out of the water not completely fatigued, whereas maybe 2 years ago when I did the exact same race, I came out of the water completely fatigued. Now, I was doing loads of swimming, but what I wasn't doing was specific enough drills a week, whereas this time I've been doing sort of drills 3 times a week. I've actually been doing less swim training per se, as in like big aerobic sets and stuff, and that's something that maybe going into this year's big race, which will all be revealed in time, I'll be able to start introducing these. So overall swim, could not have gone better. Was absolutely pleased with it. It was quite a long transition from the swim to the bike. So the transition, I think my time was around 6 minutes, but that was mainly because there was a big run there. And obviously just the panic of being in that first big race, getting in there, coming in around that 2 minute per 100 as well. You're going to be coming in with the majority of people, I'd say that's probably where the average, or you're maybe just behind the average person. So, it was quite busy in the transition. I maybe could have been a bit more efficient, but overall was pretty pleased. So the bike, this is probably the part that I was mainly concerned about. So probably having averaged about 2 sessions a week for this, which is probably not ideal. Triathlon coaches, if you're listening, then you can probably close your ears, as it's not really ideal. But basically this is where I sort of was really, really panicked. However, I did have my new bike, which compared to 2 years ago, I would say is like night and day. Having a Ferrari versus an old Volkswagen Golf. The other one's pretty reliable, but this thing is absolutely flying. So this profile is rolling hills, and it was around 720 meters, with the majority of those coming in two largish climbs. Now, I decided to take it really easy on those climbs, and I would say that, you know, I pretty much cruised up them and didn't kill myself. The 2 years ago, on the first climb, around 28k to 30k, I really pushed it way too hard, burnt too many matches, and found myself suffering for the rest of the bike. So this time, I went out with zero expectation to do anything decent. So I was actually able to just enjoy it. And yeah, it was, like I said, rolling. And then due to probably my weight disadvantage on the downhills, was able to make up quite a lot of time. The course was pretty tight. Now, coming out of that bit of the swim, I was around probably majority of the people, and it was really busy. So in that section, I averaged around 31 point something kilometers an hour, I think. And around that sort of time, there was quite a lot of people, and it was quite bunched. So even looking like back upon the race photos, I mean, there's several sections where there's maybe like 40 or 50 cyclists within the same sort of 50-meter part of the road. Now, obviously, you make your best efforts not to do any sort of illegal drafting. However, you know, for the most part, in those tight sections, there's nothing much you can do, especially on the climbs. There's literally nowhere you can go, especially if you've not got the power, like I didn't have to sort of go away. But I would say for the majority of the course, I spent on my own. And there wasn't really groups, so to speak. I know that coaches like train and practice to say, you know, stick to your new rule of 20 meters and practice, you know, working in big groups. But to be honest, I was pretty much in no man's land for most of the race, especially after, say, 45k, when you came through the tight section of the city section. I'd planned to bike to power, which is exactly what I did. I set my power and just stuck to it, and sort of just let whatever average speed that was, and tried to remain disciplined with aero. So I had, you know, a perfect tri-suit, aero helmet, really good bike, and great bike fitting from the guys at Bikera. So, you know, I had no excuses there in terms of what that was going to be like for the, like, keeping myself aero, which compared to last year, I'd say that's one of the big issues. Something that I really struggled with was remaining in aero due just to like the lack of comfort that I was feeling on the bike, and managed to keep sort of discipline with power going down, with only coming out of aero for maybe, you know, tight corners, times where people maybe passed and maybe went in front to sort of sit up a little bit. And then for some of the downhill sections were pretty sketchy. So a couple of times I came out of aero, but for the most part stayed in there, kept in the sort of aero position, and that was pretty good. And yeah, remained disciplined with the power. So the nutrition timing, what I did was make sure that I was doing around 120 grams an hour of carbs, fueling with, so that was like the sort of base standard, with taking in around 500 milligrams of electrolytes every hour on the bike, which I was taking through my front mount. I had 2 bottles on there with 90 grams Styrker carbs with electrolytes also, and then every hour was also taking a 30 gram gel, which, you know, worked out pretty well. And this is the first time that I've done the Styrker plain gels, and honestly I would say they're an absolute game changers. I would say that that's probably going to be a takeaway for the next races. Just try and avoid these gels that have got flavorings, because they clearly don't sort of suit my stomach. I had done really well with the carb loading in the couple of days before, so I'd really made sure, after you probably watched my YouTube video where I tried to aim for between 10 to 12 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight, and I ended up only doing 6. So this time I was super disciplined and made sure that I got my 12 grams of carbs an hour. Now on the YouTube video that's coming out for this race, I'll be honest, I didn't really film much. I was staying in the camper van the night before, so there wasn't really much that I was able to film in terms of nutrition. Most of it was rice bars, simple things, you know, getting it in, drinks. So that carb loading part was pretty solid, and I would say that that's what set me up to have a good race. And it was the first time in a couple months that I've really not suffered with any stomach issues. I avoided caffeine gels, and overall was pretty good. Didn't have any stomach issues. Moving on to the run, so obviously 21 kilometers. So the run course wigged me out a little bit, and the fact that the race briefing said 3 laps. Completed the first lap. I mean, I run off the bike, I was solid. I knew that to get under my target time of 5.5 hours, I was going to have to do around an hour 45 for the half marathon, which meant 5 minutes a K, which is absolutely fine. For me, well within my capabilities to do a half marathon off the bike in there, but the problem is the heat, and you can probably tell from my skin, extremely Scottish, and the heat has not sort of me. So I knew that I was going to suffer towards the end, and even though I was running 5 minutes a K at the start, which felt really, really easy, I knew that the pain would sort of come. So one thing I'll say is I'm really, really grateful that I was being super lean, like super disciplined with my pacing at the start, because to be honest, I think if I'd went harder around a 440, 450, I think I really would have been died, and then obviously I wouldn't have probably achieved my goal. And the heat management, we had about 1.5 to 2K between each aid station, and I made sure when I went through every single one, I got at least 3 water bottles. I did one down the neck, one across the head, one sip, and then the other one back across the head. So you're making sure I was really cooling down that head temperature. I didn't take my Omnius headband this time. Just felt like it really didn't make that much of a difference last time. So sorry, Omnius, if you're listening to this. Well, you're most definitely not, but if you are, you know, I'm sorry, I don't really feel like I get that much of a benefit. Whereas obviously with the ice cold water being every 2K, it's just worthwhile getting that across your head. Second lap, I really started to get disorientated with the heat. However, managed to keep my pace, and then my pace only dropped on the third lap. However, I was mentioning I was a bit wigged out because the laps were sort of 6K. So we came to the end of the third lap with 8K and it said finish, turn right. However, in my head, I couldn't really understand how it was going to work, but then obviously turned right, met Ryan, one of the coaches from Dubai, who said you obviously got that out and back. There was a 3K out and back section, but I'd mentally thought that even though like my watch was sort of saying 18K, I was kind of just sure that maybe it was a miscalculation, so I'd kind of just assumed that I was finishing. So there was a bit of a mental batter going on there, and to be honest, the last 3K felt like it lasted forever. That was a bit of a mental struggle, if I'm being honest, and yeah, really tough mentally, but managed to dig deep. And to be honest, you'll maybe see from the photos that I put up, like I was smiling the whole race, and genuinely one of the most enjoyable races I've done, and that includes running races, that includes other triathlons, includes all the other different things I've done. I would honestly say this was one of the most enjoyable races I've ever done, and was smiling the whole way through it, so it was super fun. Nutrition and fueling, so what worked, plain gels, plain carbs, and you know, it was really good. What didn't work was towards the end of the run, due to the heat, even though I'd done plenty of electrolytes during the bike part, I didn't actually take any electrolytes with me for the run part. Maybe a bit of a mistake on my part, so I really did start to get some cramp towards the last bit of the run, and maybe why my pace slipped from around a 5 to a 5:20. So, you know, ideally doing 500 milligrams of sodium on the bike kept the cramps away, but then obviously not doing it on the run meant that I struggled a bit. So note for next time, going to make sure that I keep that 500 milligrams of sodium going in during the run, or at least take a pickle juice shot or something similar. For the weight that it's going to cost, it's obviously going to be worth it for me to take that as somebody who suffers with cramp. On my run, you know, I did around 45 to 60 grams of carbs an hour. And obviously it was no issues. You know, once you're starting to get really hot and your stomach is, you know, your stomach really struggles in the heat to take it in. So to get that amount still going in, I was pretty happy with it. To talk through it mentally, pre-race nerves, to be honest, I had no full pre-race nerves, because I just resigned to enjoy this race. You know, due to the lack of biking on the way back from the blood clot issue, I just thought it's just time to enjoy a race and just go and enjoy whatever happens. If it takes me 4 hours on the bike, it takes me 4 hours. Practice positive self-talk, which is something I always talk with my athletes about. The why am I doing this? What is my reason? To be honest, my reason was Hamish was out there supporting him on his Ironman journey. Just one of my mates who's, you know, pushing to try and get good qualification, good times, and it's just great to be out with your mate on a nice little race. So to be honest, was overall focused on enjoying it. Sophie flew over there and we had some pizza, pasta, some nice dinner. Obviously Valentine's weekend, so had a great weekend. And just overall, I mean, amazing. Just no real negative thoughts, and just enjoyed it. To talk about heat and environmental factors. So I know we've been training in Dubai, but I feel like this weekend was the first weekend of the real heat coming in here. we've sort of had weeks of really, really cold weather, and I feel like that maybe we suffered a bit more because the heat came during the race where we've maybe been used to training in cooler weather. Now, what I've been doing is really focusing on doing 2 to 3 sauna sessions a week, which has really sort of helped me with the heat. I mean, if 2-3 years ago, anything over 20 degrees, I wouldn't be able to sustain. Even in races in Scotland that I did in the summer, really suffered with it. I really, really thought that my training that I've done in the sauna has really made a difference. I also think that my cooling strategy of making sure I got at least 300 mils of water across my head every sort of 5 to 10 minutes really made a difference. And what I will do for next time is just do even more sauna, even more hot baths, and really feel like my body is just going to get more and more conditioned, especially as I spend more time out in the Middle East. So yeah, that's pretty much everything for environmental factors. You can't help that if there's hills on the race. You picked a real hilly race. That's just part and parcel of it. Obviously the run was flat and that's absolutely fine. Equipment reflections, so bike set up on my Quintana Roo VPR. Absolutely fantastic. Best bike that I've ever ridden for triathlon, so amazing. Great to have a proper bike fitting on it before, and was set up just with my normal wheels. I made a reflection during training that the disc wheel was probably a bit too much for me as I was currently not really pushing any watts, so just decided to go with the normal DT Swiss wheels. Was absolutely perfect. Shoe choice, I went with my Adidas Pro 4, which were, you know, pretty perfect. And for my clothing, I went for my MBO tri-suit that Hamish got me in. To be honest, it was absolutely fine with my aero helmet, which the first time I wore it, I had real concerns about the heat, but to be honest, it was fine. You're hot, it doesn't really matter about that. What were my reflections about training going forward? Obviously got bigger races coming up, bigger triathlons, so what would be my main thing? So my running volume at the minute is absolutely fantastic. I'm still hitting 6 or so runs a week. And I'm still hitting my swims, but what I will say is the bike volume must increase, which, you know, when my Sunday bike comes in the schedule, I really can't be affording to skip that, especially in this sort of off-season part. Another thing is just make sure non-negotiable that my strength sessions are getting done at least twice a week. And then one thing I will say is I keep suffering with a bit of back cramp, so I really need to make sure that I'm working on core and upper back strength. Not just, you know, your traditional bodybuilder back strength, but all sorts of core mobility and anti-rotation. So that's something that I need to do, and then just keep going. Now, body compositions considerations. So my doctor said that at the minute that I'm potentially slightly overweight, with, you know, the potential to lose 3 to 4 kilos to really get me back into a healthy weight range, which is absolutely fair consideration. I'm possibly carrying, you know, I think on my latest DEXA scan, I was carrying around 28 kilos of excess body fat, which is just way too much for someone who's focusing on endurance events, and just extra weight there. It's not doing anything. Yes, I'm an acceptable body fat percentage at the minute, and I've not got any sort of body dysmorphia thinking that I'm, you know, look absolutely horrendous. Considering where I've come from, I'm doing pretty decent, but basically I want to just cut down a few kilos. Obviously, I've been put on sort of a bit of a specialized diet, so making sure to control the calories and make sure that the calories that are going in match the work that I'm doing. So on days that I'm doing slightly less, making sure to prioritize proteins and then carbing up around key sessions. Now, obviously we go straight into Vienna Marathon block. So the next bit of discussion is going to be training for a marathon. So obviously that's going to be a slightly different, interesting take. However, I do want to keep this triathlon training in my marathon plan as extra cross training. So that's basically the next part. So advice to anyone doing Ironman 70.3, make sure you don't skip your bike sessions. I'd say they should be the key. If you're going to do lots of runs, make sure you do lots of runs off the bike. Make sure you nail and practice your fueling. Train in race conditions. Now, if you're in the Middle East, you're training in a hot country, you can already do that. Maybe start practicing training in a bit later in the day. And then that's what I would say, try and substitute it with hot weather training that could be pretty decent. Biggest lesson, one sentence: go out there to enjoy yourself. That's for the most part, even for people who are chasing times, go out and try and enjoy yourself. Muscat 70.3, would I do it again? I'm probably not going to do it again in a hurry because I've done it twice now, and there's so many other different 70.3s that I want to try and attack. So I'm definitely going to try and consider doing other ones before they come up. And obviously, what's next? Vienna Marathon. So we're going into a block now. Hopefully you enjoy the YouTube video that I'm bringing out next on my camper van life and a bit of race footage. So I appreciate if you could give that a listen. Now, I appreciate you listening to these solo podcasts, and thank you very much for tuning into the channel. We'll catch you on the next one.